So right now, if you guys like, if you guys have anything you want to share or talk, highlight maybe someone that's doing it right. I see Drew's on here. Kyle, hello. If you guys have anything you'd like to share, you're welcome to take a couple minutes. When you guys do present, just be mindful, take, no more than a couple minutes. I hate muting people, so please don't make me, please. It's really awkward on Zoom. So yeah, other than that, I'll turn it over for you guys if you want to share anything that's going on. Hi, Doug.
Well, I can introduce myself since I just joined last week. And my name is Mary Landis. I work for Foss North America. I'm an industry sales manager, and the main products that I sell are near-infrared spectrometers, which can be incredibly useful in measuring various parameters of the crop, different parts, and giving you results with just making real-time decisions within 30 seconds so that you can make decisions with those parameter results that you're looking for. And I'm really excited to be a part of this and looking forward to learning a lot more about the industry and all the different aspects to it. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks. Anybody else? Hi, Dave. Hi, Drew.
Actually, I wanted to just introduce myself. My name's Heidi Decker. I'm with Great Plains Analytical Laboratory here in Kansas City, and I do believe we actually do some work for IND Hemp already. But we are looking to expand that and to get more involved in testing for hemp. Great Plains Analytical actually started with grain sciences. But we also do microbiology and nutritionals and a slew of other things as well. But, just being able to expand everything and get more diverse products in here to test is always something that we're interested in. So I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. Okay. Hi, Bruce. I see a few more of you have logged on. Steve, I can open it up if at the end for introductions, or if you guys would like to. I'll make sure that all of you will have copies of the chat as well as the transcription and the link for the video. It'll come out through MailChimp. It takes us a little bit just to get things transcribed and ready to send, but watch for that in your spam if it goes to spam. But other than that, you guys, with the same email you logged in, you will get a copy. Just a heads up. I think that my chat is unlocked. I mysteriously locked it somehow, and I don't know how to unlock it. And so sometimes it's hard to copy. So that's why I've been sure to try to include that for you guys. Other than that, Greg, I'd love to turn it over to you. For those of you that missed the intro in the beginning, I'm going to turn it over to Greg. Greg is going to do a real quick intro about himself and what they're doing, what they have going on. If you guys have questions, feel free to raise your hand. There is a little icon down at the bottom of the screen, or you can type your question in the comment and I can ask it and moderate back and forth. If we do open it up, please be mindful of your time on the microphone, just a couple of minutes. Really about asking questions and learning, educating, diving into the grain side with a focus on the grain and feed today. Okay. Anyways, Greg, I'll turn it over. Thank you very much for joining.
Well, thank you, Mandy, and thanks everybody for having us here. First, I do want to start off, obviously clarify, I'm not Morgan Elliott. Many of you may have been coming here to see Morgan speak today. Our team, our team has quite a few balls in the air. It's planting season. We're still contracting final acres, and Morgan's at the heart of most everything. So I'm sure you'll get to meet her at a later time, and you're stuck with me for the day. And I get to talk about hemp for an hour, which is what I do pretty much all the time. My name is Gregg Gnecco. I actually live in White Salmon, Washington, which is just on the Columbia River on the Oregon-Washington border, across from Hood River, Oregon, east of Portland. And I started in hemp in 2017 when the first Washington state crop was planted for grain. And we went down that path, and my wife and I started a company called Hemp Northwest and worked to establish some small-scale grain processing, got some oil presses, and worked in 2018 with the Colville tribes in Washington on that grain crop, and worked with them to bring the first Northwest grown grain crop to market. So that was our little feather in the cap ahead of the 2018 Farm Bill. A lot of work, a lot of money. Nobody made anything, but, we were forging a path that's a lot easier nowadays than it was even just 2-3 years ago. Then transitioning, we do a lot of work with the Hemp Feed Coalition, which if anybody on this call, but if you're touching grain in any form, you should be a member of the Hemp Feed Coalition. It's just a collective voice to help us get the approvals for federal animal feed. And through that work, I got to meet the team behind IND Hemp in the early stages as they were setting up. And being a small Northwest mom and pop operation, you hear something big's happening in Montana, you got to figure out what's going on because it definitely affects, what our plans were and our expansion and investment. And long story short, we all got along really well and figured that we would share seed and contracts to support the Washington, Oregon farmers for 2020. And so we partnered with IND Hemp to bring those contracts and the X59 seed that we grow to Washington, Oregon. And then COVID hit us all in, this time last year. And we really saw some synergies. And so starting almost a year ago at this time, I joined IND Hemp full time and started as director of sales and marketing and kind of built a lot of the forward momentum at the company. And now as we're growing, we're bringing on some more sales staff specifically. So I get to focus on managing the brand and communications and marketing and making strategic relationships in the industry. So basically doing this. So that's my quick version of the story, how we got. I mean, as you all know, you're all in hemp. There is no quick answer to a hemp talk because it takes us in so many different directions. But yeah, so shift a little bit. IND Hemp started in 2018 and decided to get in at scale. There was a lot of stories in Montana in 2017-18. I'm sure some of you were around then and remember when all of a sudden, Colorado, Kentucky, Oregon were on the map, and all of a sudden we hear 22,000 acres in Montana. Who the hell's growing that? What's going on up there? And unfortunately, a lot of those contracts were bad contracts, and farmers were led down a path, and companies changed hands, and contracts weren't honored, and a lot of that material still rotting in round bales all across Montana. So Ken Elliott, our founder, really saw an opportunity to support the type of farmers that were in Montana. And Montana is obviously a big grain state. If you look at a map of Montana and you look at north central Montana, it's actually called the Golden Triangle, from Great Falls up to Havre and over to really the Glacier Park area. And that's where most of the wheat that's grown that stays on the West Coast comes. There's General Mills milling there. There's ADM milling there. And a lot of barley as well. Anheuser-Busch malts barley right there. So very possible that you've eaten something or drank a beverage that was grown in the Golden Triangle. And so one thing that we all learned in the early stages of grain is you grow grain where grains are grown. And you find ways to rotate them in with the other crops there and work with the existing farm structure that they have, the existing drills, the existing combines. And so that's what led us into grain. And as you'll see and hear more with all the things that IND Hemp is doing, Montana's a big place. And farmers have big farms in Montana. And so we had to scale pretty quickly, both with the oil seed and now going into the fiber side of the business. So our plant came online in Fort Benton. We're right on the Missouri River, actually right where Lewis and Clark hit the first falls and couldn't go up on the steamships anymore. And so Fort Benton was the actual first fort and settlement in Montana. So known as the birthplace of Montana, and all roads lead out of Fort Benton. So we're hoping to make it the heart of the hemp industry moving forward. So we came online early last year, and our facility can do 10 to 12,000 acres of hemp grain in production. So obviously launching into COVID was really a bad time, but we're getting through it and supporting our growers and doing a lot of big things. So again, try to keep it short, but it's hard to have a short answer to a hemp question.
I'm on mute. Remember how I reminded everybody to unmute themselves? Well, I don't know if we want to dive in with questions or if you would like to show. Maybe we start with some of the things that you're doing, Gregg. I know you have some samples. Do you want to show those? Or do you want to just kind of dive into some questions that we got?
Yeah, if you want to see me, it's so hard to show on a Zoom meeting, and I was told don't come with a presentation ready, so I don't have fancy slides and all that to show.
Nope.
But I mean, most people know what hemp seeds look like, right? We'll start at the 101. Difference between hemp seed and hemp grain. That came from the nomenclature from the Canadians when they got into the business. And it has to do with how Health Canada regulated certified seed stock. And it's simply, You plant seeds and you harvest grain, even though it's the same thing all day long. It's a way to keep it separate. So in correct nomenclature, when we're talking about hemp seed or hemp grain, hemp seed is something that we put in the ground. Hemp grain is something that we harvest out of the ground. The basic processing for hemp grain, there's two product lines. First is a dehulling line. That's where you get hemp hearts. Hopefully this is not new to anybody. Oh, hard to do on the, I now have hemp hearts all in my keyboard. That's okay.
Okay, so real quick, for those of you that are not very familiar with Zoom, in the top right corner when you move your mouse, there's a view. You can put it on speaker view where he will be on your main screen, and then you can see what he's doing or presenting a little bit easier or better. So if you're interested, you have control of changing it, to your own view each time. So, and
I'm going to just stop real quick so you guys don't get a headache, but I need to dump this off the keyboard. I just poured hemp hearts all over everything.
We were just joking around about the best way to get dirty is working in the hemp industry, and that people don't really realize how dirty fiber is or it is, because it all just is dusty and it explodes. And yeah, I see you laughing, Rachel.
Got the spoon. So there's your hemp hearts. That is just a raw shelled hemp seed. That is the most common, most enjoyable, easiest way to adapt to putting hemp foods in your diet. Real quick in the room first, just to get an idea of who we're talking to. Is everybody somewhat familiar with hemp foods? Raise your hand if you don't know anything about hemp foods. Are you aware that it is the most complete, well-rounded nutritional profile of anything that grows on the planet? It's got all 21 amino acids, makes it a complete protein, has the perfect balance of omega-3 to omega-6 fatty acids. That's the stuff that our brains are made of. And in short, it just truly is the most nutritious thing that we can put in our body. And so we really should be urging people to put more and more of it in their bodies. So that's the dehulling line. Opens the shell, you get hemp hearts out. It's interesting because when we say it like that, it sounds so simple. And when I got into this, 4 years ago, it was, we just need to get a dehuller, and then we can make hemp hearts. I'll expand a little bit. Let me go through the process. Talk a little bit more, and somebody remind me if I forget about how the infrastructure around the piece is more important than the piece. It's the same thing when it comes to decortication for fiber plant. Buying the decorticator is easy. That just takes a lot of money and a desire to pull the trigger. But building the infrastructure around how it works, how stuff comes in, how trucks come in, and everything else. Hemp hearts are the same way. The cracking of the shell is a very simple process. The dehullers are actually only about this big in a line that does tons per hour, and it just cracks the shell open. The secret of hemp hearts is how do you separate all those shells from the hemp heart once it's cracked open? And there's multiple processes down that line, from air separators, gravity tables, density separators, screen decks, multiple processes where when you're coming out of the dehuller, you've got a mix of hulls, what we call fines, which are broken hearts that are a smaller size. So you'll go through a screen deck first and get those fines off, and then it's going to go up through some aspiration. It's going to go on a gravity table sorting. That's going to really take the majority of the hulls away from the hearts. Then the hearts are going to come down through another level. They're going to go through another screen deck, through another air, and then finally through color sorting when we're going for the highest grade. And most of those processes that I just described are to get the last 5% of shells out. Your first mechanical process can get you a hemp heart that, looks like a hemp heart, but when you look close, you're going to start seeing shells in there. And for those of you that do eat hemp hearts, I'm sure you're aware, the last thing you want is get shells in your hemp hearts. And, really one can lodge into your tooth like a popcorn kernel, and it's just uncomfortable. And so there's, a grading and a process of steps that really at the end of the day, the dehuller was the easy piece. It's figuring all those other steps out down the line to actually get a product that's, market ready to go in a bag. Sorry, I went off on a tangent there. I don't really have much structure, so you guys can holler if I'm going the wrong way. I'm just free flowing. So that's the dehulling line. The other side of it is cold press expelling. And that can be everything from short barrel press, it's like a 5 horsepower motor, which is a lot of them that are common. And you get seed cake like this out of it. Basically, you're got a screw that's crushing that seed. The oil comes out along a sieve along the edge, and then you get the meal out the other side. I do have some nice oil here. This is actually our first batch of organic for the year. We're proud of the fact that we have more organic acres. First, Montana has more grain acres under organic production in the country, and we've got more of those organic acres into hemp probably than the rest of the country as well. So excited about that. And then the other side of this is this gets milled down. I don't really want to make a mess on this. This is basically this just milled out. And at the scale that we operate at IND Hemp, we actually run larger presses that actually crush on the outside rather than the inside. So instead of getting a pellet out of our presses there, we're getting kind of a chip on the outside of the screw. And our whole system's automated, so that's going right through a conveyor, right into a milling process, right into an air classification process, and we get the 30% protein. See if I can do this without making a mess on my computer, which you can see has a lot of the shell still in it, which is a higher fiber part of the seed. And then you get your really fine green 50% protein or higher percentage of protein. And so really everything in hemp grain production is through either of those processing lines, and it's all a cold, raw, natural process. So the flip side of that, and there was already a question earlier about mold and mycotoxins and other things. The interesting thing about the hemp seed is because there is no kill step at all in the process, for modern food safety and HACCP plans and food safety plans, the only way that we know that it's a safe product from the field all the way to the shelf is testing. And you'd be surprised, well, maybe not. There's a group of hemp people and most people are on other sides of hemp, and everybody knows we got to test everything more than everything else. But we have to test the hemp seed more than you're testing any other grain in any other commodity production in the country, really, because of that. You know, we tell farmers it's the only thing that they plant with a drill and harvest with a combine that they have to treat with the food safety level like a strawberry. And it's really an education as well to growers initially. You know, I don't know if you guys have ever been around wheat country, but, you know, the truck gets jammed up and they hop up in there in their boots with a shovel and, you know, they're shoveling around or hop into the bins, you know, because wheat's going to get milled. It's going to get cleaned. It's going to get bleached most of the time now. And all of those are processes that if there was something in that wheat, it would get mitigated in that process. The hemp seed, and one of the reasons why it is so nutritious through the whole process, is we don't heat it. We don't treat it with any chemicals. So there is no kill step in it. So it really starts at the field, which is why most people are starting to grow at scale, have agronomists working with their farmers, really to teach them that edge. We're teaching basically grain farmers how to be produce food safety handlers. And really that's the crux. I will give a shout out to Roger Bushis and Healthy Oilseeds in North Dakota. I don't know if any of you know Roger, but we call him the Godfather. He was the first one, we believe, to be crushing hemp seeds in the U.S. He runs a flax operation, so it's easy to just pour the seed in his process and go. He didn't have to build anything. I got off topic. Started thinking about Roger, and I got all nostalgic and got off topic. I apologize. I'm going to take a sip of water.
What was Roger's name again?
Bushis. Don't ask me to spell it. Gouissias or something. Might be an extra vowel in there somewhere. Definitely two S's in the middle. And that's healthy seeds. That's an easy way to find them.
Healthy seed oils, yeah.
In North Dakota. So I don't know how.
Gouissias.
Oh, yes. I'm back. Thank you. You guys got me all excited. If you don't know Roger, get to know Roger. We call him the Godfather. He's helped us all. He helped Tanya and I when we set up our first facility out here. He worked with the Colville tribes that year, and that's how we met him. And he helped us at IND Hemp as well, so he's helped a lot. But they actually worked a program with North Dakota Department of Agriculture to basically provide a bridge to what's known as the produce safety training. I don't know, you guys food safety people in here? Basically, there's two levels of food safety. If you work on a farm and you deal with vegetables and produce, you're trained at a different level than if you drive a tractor and all you do is harvest with a combine. And North Dakota is the first state with Healthy Oilseeds to really put together an official state training program to train grain growers how to handle that grain like a food product. And it comes down to the simple fact that you've got a big truck and it's, the truck's dumping out into the conveyor to go in the bin. everybody wants to reach up and grab a handful of that seed. Well, that's the worst thing you can do because your hands are the most contaminated thing in the field. And even when we do lab tests, we had to at IND Hemp learn to send a full kit out to all of our farmers just before we call in their grain load. So we send out a kit that's a bag, it's got a scoop, it's got gloves, and literally we have a training that, we want to help you be successful. In order for you to be successful, your grain needs to meet a food grade spec. And the last thing we want you to do is get denied on your lot because you scooped it out, you sample out with your hand or put it into a dirty vessel, and that's different than growers have to do for all these other crops. If you're, like I said, if you're growing wheat or barley or corn or all this, you don't have to, beyond the licensing and all the hemp bullshit we all deal with, you don't have to get a lab test just to say there's less than 1,000 CFUG of mold in your product, and to transition a little bit, if you do have just over that right now, so let's say you've got 1,400 mold count. Now, 1,400 mold count, that's a colony forming unit per gram is what the CFUG is. The testing people probably know this more than I do. It's a very, very small amount. It's in most feeds, they don't even have levels because the animals won't eat it if it's too moldy to eat it. We can't even go look at, a wheat feed recommendation and say, you can have this much mold count. But the point I'm trying to make is that right now in our industry, if you are over that 1,000 CFUG, we can't take that lot in. And so literally it's a fine line for a grower if they either make the food safety or right now without animal feed. And yes, you can burn it as diesel and there's all kinds of things you can do industrial with hemp seed, but it's not viable financially that way. Farmer won't even make their inputs back and nobody's going to bring it into a facility to process it because they don't want to contaminate their stuff. So even the potential out isn't really an out. So really it comes back to like everything else. I'm sure everybody's heard it with every side of the industry, garbage in, garbage out, right? Good product in, good product out. And it really starts in the field with the agronomy and training our growers to make sure that they're cutting a clean crop and bringing that to us. So redirect us, Mandy. I'm off on a tangent again.
Mandy's muted. I was curious real quick. I'll jump in. This is Drew. What do you do with your stock as far as processing?
Stocks. Well, right now they've been baled all around Montana. And this is mostly a grain talk for us, but you're going to lead me into the fiber side and I don't know if we'll get pulled back. IND Hemp is currently building a large fiber processing facility. We're actually landing equipment right now. If you guys follow on our Instagram or other things, we're actually very transparent and showing a lot of the things that we always wish we could see, but nobody would show because everybody wants to hide in a cloak. You can see us unloading equipment. We bought a LaRoche decortication line, a 5-ton an hour, and built a facility around it. And to back up, to address it more from your question, when we started growing grain in Montana, most of the crops there are either wheat or barley. That's the primary crop. And they're all dryland farmers, very low rainfall. And so it's all no-till production. And in a no-till production, they're combining those crops and leaving, a bit of stubble in the field. That stubble both adds carbon and nutrients back to the soil, but it also captures moisture. And more importantly, it captures snow because I don't know if you've ever been in Montana in the wintertime, it just blows across. And so the farmers are doing everything they can to try to get that moisture to stay on their field and not blow off their field into the road. When we started moving into hemp with that type of production, they very quickly learned you put down a hemp grain crop, and even if you lay it down or cut a low crop and leave a stubble, can't really bring a drill through and plant winter wheat behind it. Because as we know, it's, longest, strongest fiber in the world, and that's not an easy thing to pull implements through. So long ways around, we actually got into the fiber business differently than most in the industry, and it was more from realizing that if we didn't get into the fiber industry, all the farmers were going to stop growing grain in Montana because they had to figure out what to do with this stuff. And one thing that a lot of people don't know because they don't like to talk about it much, but a good majority of the fields that are grown for grain in Canada are actually burned off, either standing in the field or harvested. And, there's a cost of diesel and time and equipment to bale it. And, if you bale alfalfa and that's, what you focus on, and you go pull your baler through, a hemp field, that's a learning experience too. So every implement from the beginning to the end, hemp is more difficult and harder. And so really our initial goal and how we're approaching it at IND Hemp is a dual purpose crop process. We grow primarily the X59 variety. We've actually licensed that variety now and represent it in all 50 states. We did that more specifically because we needed to get affordable seed stock for our growers. I could go down a whole pathway about affordable seed. Maybe we'll get there later. I don't want to divert. That's, even when you guys were talking ahead of time, Mandy and Bob, affordable seed is a big issue that nobody's talking about, especially as we get into fiber, because the economics don't work at $3, $4, $5 a pound. The economics work at $2 a pound, and we don't have that supply yet. So anyhow, sorry, to get back on track.
So ironically enough, I guess great minds think alike, because the questions were about which cultivars and which seeds, a lot of genetics questions, cost. So if it is something you want to touch on, you're welcome to. Yeah.
Good transition. I got show and tell. This is a very short, dry Montana plant, but it shows the architecture of what an X59 plant does. And different than a lot of the Canadian varieties, even a lot of the European varieties that will have seed a good bit up the stalk, the X59 will usually grow kind of one big seed head pom-pom right on top. And so that actually gives us the ability, this plant here is only, 3 feet tall. It's tiny. It's my little travel version. But even this plant, because it's so consistent, they can cut right about here and get all the grain. And even that, there's a harvestable bit of straw that could be processed into hurd and fiber. And so, I don't know if I answered your question, Drew, or if I just went many ways around it. But yeah, we're working with a dual purpose process to start, and then using the economics of that to transition, kind of into the strategy. The big thing in fiber right now is, one, the seed costs too much. We're still figuring out the cultivars. We're still figuring out the production methods, the agronomy, the harvest methods, and all of that. And with all of those variables, there's no way anybody understands the economics, because you've got to understand at least 3 or 4 of those variables along the way before you even know, does it pencil out? And at the end of the day, one of the things we've already learned from the CBD side is it's not healthy for the country to lead a bunch of farmers down a path of hemp that doesn't pencil out. We honestly deal with the fallout of that every day. We've got colonies and other people in Montana that have good acres that hemp grain would make sense to, and they're nervous about getting into a contract with hemp people. We've got to rebuild that faith and trust from, years past and contracts that have gone bad. We are moving into fiber-specific production this year. We did test some genetics last year. We're actually very fortunate that the state of Montana is very forward-thinking. Most of you probably don't know that, but you can thank former director, Bob Church, can't leave his name off the top of my head, but Montana went to bat in the final version of comments for the final rule. If you all remember, it was 6 months ago or 4 months ago, it was another opportunity to comment on the final rule. And Montana brought forth the plan that they established in 2014 as we move forward with the early pilot program. And what Montana did is they looked to the Canadians, because honestly, most of Montana, all of Montana shares a border with Canada. We have farmers that, are right across the border, and recognized the certified seed varieties that were coming out of Canada and out of Europe. So right from the beginning in 2014, Montana had a program that was an ABCD program. And starting with the B, a B-level seed was any certified variety that's proven somewhere else at a similar latitude. So that opened up Montana in year 1 to all of the Canadian varieties, because they all work. They're all proven. X59 is one of them, all the HGI varieties, Manitoba's varieties, Parkland's varieties. So there was an opportunity to get seed for those places. Once that seed had been grown a year and tested in multiple places, if it matched the same results that, in our case, Canada had, then Montana would move that to an A-class seed. And so it's basically a certified seed that's proven in Montana. And then a C-class seed would be essentially most of your CBD genetics. It's I don't know where this came from. I'm going to grow it. We'll test it. And then a D-class seed is something that is proven to go hot multiple times, and they've put it on a list that they won't recognize. And so what does the ABC do? The ABC do is all about testing and confidence. And in our case, Last year, we planted just under 10,000 acres. That's about 400,000 pounds of seed. So, if you think about the scale of that, picture 10 semi-trucks just of planting seed to get to that. All of that planting seed came from the breeder of that seed that owns the genetics that, has been raising X59 and got it approved in Canada. Side note along the way, for those of you that don't know, approved cultivars in Canada, farmers don't even have to pay to get tested because it's on a list that's approved. The government knows it's not going to go high. And so what we had brought forth with the Department of Ag, and obviously we have a big footprint in Montana, so we have a good voice with the people that matter, is this burden shouldn't be on the farmer that bought their seed from us, just like the other guy bought their seed from us. It should come back to a management of where that seed comes from, right? So that the farmer's not, paying the miles of the Department of Ag guy to drive out to his farm to take samples all over his field. Fields in Montana are also pretty big. You know what I mean? So some of these states that have X number of tests per square, Washington State here, we had a couple grain fields here, and they're still regulated in the fear that something across the field might be different. We had to pay miles for Department of Ag to drive all the way to Eastern Washington, and she took like 30 samples of a 60-acre grain field. It was all a certified variety that was the same as everything we planted in Montana. So what they did at the Department of Ag is they did risk-based sampling. And if you're growing an A seed now and they know it's coming from us, they're only going to test 15, maybe it's 20 now with the new change, but a small percent of those fields get tested, right? They just say, hey, we'll go over here. That's representative of that seed. A B-level seed, that percentage goes up a little bit. And then by the time you're at a C-level seed, it's 100% testing. And the benefit for everybody else, if you remember when the final rule came out, there was a little section in there that said, in the sampling and testing, based on risk-based testing, if a state Department of Agriculture has an approved plan. And that's basically specifically speaking to Montana going to bat and said, hey, we've been doing this longer than you guys have been doing this. It works. It works in Canada. Let's help our farmers save some money on testing and recognize these seeds. So again, I got off on a tangent. I don't know which way we're going. I apologize.
You're good. This is great info. I was just reading through a couple of questions, and if anybody else has questions, just putting out there, you've got a button at the bottom with a hand. If there's something, that's pressing that you'd like to ask, feel free to ask. There were a couple questions about mold. I know mold is an issue in some situations. What about for you? Is it something that you're facing, something you deal with often?
In the hemp grain, the big thing is it comes to the post-harvest handling. And what we've learned is, and the interesting thing, I will tell everybody, just a disclaimer first, go on the Canadian Hemp Trade Alliance website. I think it's hemptrade.ca. And there's a digital production guide that says how to grow hemp in Canada. And it's a lot of simple bullet points. And a lot of people, including pretty much every farmer we meet along the way, looks at the simple bullet points and wants to reinvent the wheel. And they don't realize that it took 20 years of Canadians working together to get that down to a bullet point and say, plant this depth. There's a reason why you don't go this way or that way. There's a reason why you don't lay it over and swath it. Mold is one of them. We have the benefit in the grain side of learning what we can from an industry that did pave the way and figure out all the food safety and what we need to test for and what can happen. And so the thing about hemp grain is it actually starts back with the fiber in the fact that as fiber and stalks mature, they cure and they get thicker, right? So your plant, when it's, mid-season, it's a lot softer. You can break it. At the end of the season, when it's dried out, it's a lot stiffer. When it gets stiffer, it's that long, strong, durable fiber. That long, strong, durable fiber is not very good for farm implements. And so we actually cut hemp grain wetter than we would cut any other crop. So much so that farmers that farm big acres aren't comfortable even driving the combine into it the first time. They're like, this is still green. Like, this doesn't make sense. If you ever see the golden wheat fields, they're golden. You hear stories about in some areas they desiccate it with chemicals just to kill it off so that it's dry. They do the same thing with garbanzo beans and barley and everything else they grow, on the prairies and the big acres. And to get them to go into the hemp field, you're fighting this balance of the greener the crop is, the easier it is to drive a combine through it because the easier it is to push that stuff out the back. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, the wetter the seed is, the more risk there is, and the more difficult it is to clean both within the settings of the combine and as it comes out onto the field. because as you all know, that green stuff is sticky when it's wet, right? When it's, dry, like this one, I'm going to make it messier. This thing's dry. You touch it and it crumbles. That's how the farmers would like to harvest the crop. So when you're harvesting a grain crop, if you look at a seed head, this is a pretty short one. They can be sometimes twice that. You're trying to get 75 to 80% maturity when you cut it. And so it's going to mature from the bottom up. And so on the earlier side, you could cut, that part's mature, this part's immature. You've got a greener stalk. It's going to go through the combine easier. Or weather comes in or something else. And that gives you actually 2 to 3 weeks sometimes and still being within that 70 to 80%. You start getting to the point where the seeds are dropping out of the bottom. The birds are starting to land and eat the ones out of the top, but you've got 70 to 80% maturity up in the top. At that point, you're getting a much cleaner grain. At a dry stalk, you can actually get, with a modern combine and the right settings, you get a very clean grain right out of the combine. But it's harder on the implements, and especially in Montana, big farmers, they've got big combines. Those things cost $500,000 or more, and they're really nervous about charging into a hemp field, especially when they hear how durable it is. So it's a balance there. But then from the food safety side, even the driest side, the seed is wetter than it can be stored. So we're looking for a 7 to 9% moisture rate in the seed for long-term storage. And usually you're coming off the field 12 to 15, 12 to 18%. Some of the drier places in Montana, you get an early frost, and that actually does a natural desiccation. So we might be coming off, 10, 11. But either way, there's more moisture in the seed than you can put in the bin. And so the crux of the entire operation for growing hemp grain is you've got about 3 to 4 hours from the moment it comes out of the combine until you've got it on air drying, or it will get hot and that moisture will come out and it will spoil. Both from a damage to the quality of the seed. If it gets hot, remember, everything we do is a cold operation. Even the oil pressing is a cold press operation. At a certain point, really above 140 degrees or so, you start damaging some of those fatty acids and beneficial nutrients in the seed. And I will say, we have to tell the farmers, and one of the first fields we cut last year, we told them 5 times. He comes to the growers' meetings, comes to the harvest meeting. Don't go in for dinner without putting it in the bin. Like, that's part of your plan for the day, cutting hemp grain. You don't cut up till sunset. And we had one farm, they harvested a half a truck and came out in the morning and there's mold all over it. So the mold, most of the time, just to shift back from a source, most of the spores that would create the mold or any of the contaminants in the grain is all coming from the flour. That's where the moisture is. That's where things can land on it. That's where a bird could land on it. That's why we have to test for E. coli and other things, because a bird could land on it and crap on it, and that happens. That's where you would pick something like that up. But the seeds themselves, I would say most everybody here is familiar with touching hemp seeds. They've got a fairly slick outside shell that will shed a lot of things as long as you're not creating a warm, steamy environment between them to grow. So on that same note, we're learning what the Canadians have learned long ago, which is to really push for field cleaning. So we're getting our farmers to invest, time and money, like all these steps. It's easy for all of us to sit here and say, we got to do this and we got to do this. Well, you get out to the field and the guy's got to spend a couple $100 on diesel to do what you just said you need to do, and equipment to get things moving. It's an investment in an industry where a lot of them are still on the fence of, is this going to work? They're kind of taking a risk with a small bit of their acres, but they're not all in, right? They're not betting the farm on hemp and they're not believing it's going to, pay for their kids' college. And so that's a piece that falls into that, right? So if you want them to field clean it, that's getting a piece of equipment on the field the day it's coming out of the field. And you're either coming directly out of the combine into either a rotary or screen cleaner or from the truck going into the bin. But if you do that, your chances of having a food grade product when we call it in a couple months later is exponentially higher. So apologize again, I'm going down the rails. There's so much we could talk about.
That's okay. We've got some questions. Bruce, I see your hand is raised. I feel like I'm calling on kids.
Yeah, if you can ask them, I can't keep trying to read and talk at the same time, so I'm not even looking at the chat.
No, I got you. Bruce, go ahead.
Yeah, great. And once again, Mandy, thank you for pulling together so many people. You've been doing such a great job over the last couple of months pulling together so many people. It's like herding cats. I know it's not easy, but you're doing a great job. And Greg, thank you for offering up so much knowledge to everybody. I have like 8 questions for you, but I don't want to take up too much time. But how you had mentioned that a lot of times up in Canada, a lot of big growers are having to burn off the fields after they harvest grain. Right? It's green. It's not seed. It's great. What's the answer to that? I was talking to Eric McKee out at Milko just a couple of weeks ago, and he was saying that it's possible that some people are finding that they can actually get more herd out of a grain crop than out of a fiber/herd crop. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, and first let's talk about the agronomy and reason behind that. Basically, you're growing fiber specific and you're trying to get the long, fast fiber. You're growing a tighter population, which isn't branching as much, and you're usually harvesting it before it goes full to seed. When you're growing at a grain population, it's enough that, obviously there's enough room to get these seed heads and get a canopy. And you're getting more herd because the plant itself is adding structure, especially on the plains where the wind is blowing. That's adding a lot of structure vertically in that plant through the herd. And so, the windier it is, the thicker the herd will be. The bigger the seed head, the thicker the herd will be. So there is good herd. I asked the same question because I was really, part of the last few years in the hemp industry is we're kind of sleuthing around all the time, right? We're doing things like this and pick up a piece of knowledge here and pick up a piece of knowledge here. And I will say, I have a lot of respect for the Canadians that have come ahead of us. And they want to share just enough to get us in trouble, but they don't want to give the whole playbook all the time. And that's okay. We're learning and we're doing it here. And some of those lessons we're learning over again. But the answer, and I asked, I'll credit Daryl Mack or something, I can't remember his last name. Daryl's the agronomist that has worked for Manitoba Harvest and Hemp Oil Canada since the beginning. He's truly one of the OG, hemp agronomists in Canada. And he's the one that has been responsible for the breeding of the canola variety that Hemp Oil Canada licensed, late 90s. And I asked him, I met him in North Dakota one time, and I asked him, I said, how come fiber stuff hasn't happened in Canada? And he said, well, the hard thing is you guys think we're growing all this stuff up here, but we're spread out. We still have a hard time getting growers. We're in Manitoba. We've got growers all the way over in Ontario, and we've got growers all the way out in Alberta and Saskatchewan. And the reality for them was that there is no centralized location. And, when we shift this conversation, I know a lot of people are into fiber all the time, and we like talking about it because it's exciting. The base economics of any fiber operation starts with that location. There's a certain point where, we commonly say it's about 100 miles on the far end. You stretch that a little bit in Montana because everything's stretched in Montana, and they drive all over the place, and they pump oil out of the ground, and it's cheaper than it is in most other states. So, most farms truck stuff quite a ways. But yeah, they never had enough production in an area to build a facility for fiber, which costs tens of millions of dollars to get up and be able to feed that stuff. So there is some hope because there's folks like us, and I know there's other folks in the country that are coming online. And as we come online, we need more capacity, and we're actually running around looking for some of those old bales. Some farmers bale them, some farmers don't. And it comes down to the cost both on your time and, your inputs, your fuel and whatever, and your baling equipment of whether it makes sense for a farmer to do it. At the end of the day, if nobody's going to buy your straw, it's really cheaper just throw a match and watch it burn, unfortunately. I've seen a hemp field burn. I saw a 15-foot fiber hemp field that Colville tribe drew next to the grain field in 2018. And it was just the right thing too many years early, and there was no harvesting equipment, and we couldn't do anything with it. And they had to get a wheat crop in behind it, and it broke my heart. But that's the roller coaster of building an industry.
Well,
He's off the other hand. Someone's got to coordinate this.
I saw Mary's got another one. Mary, go ahead. Your hand's up.
Okay, cool. You guys can hear me okay?
Yes, you're good.
Okay. Crazy construction. So anyway, when you were talking about like the A, B, C, and D grade seed, I was just curious. That's got to be written down somewhere, correct? So what qualifies that?
Yeah, that would be within the Montana state plan.
Okay, so is each state responsible for maintaining that themselves?
That's something that currently is only recognized in Montana. And so Montana was able to get language added to the Farm Bill, and there was a coordination between Department of Ag and all the farmers that we could actually get to write a letter and all of us that work, and really sharing a common voice with a common message to USDA of like, whoa, you guys are going way too fast on this 15 days and other stuff. You're not thinking about big farmers. And one thing, it's a Montana program, and it's possible that other states could develop something similar, but the state would have to develop it in their program and then get it approved by USDA in order to implement it.
All right.
I see a question on here too, and I don't know if I missed this or if it was regarding or related to something we were talking about earlier, but what are your thoughts about supercritical CO2? Is that for extraction, I'm assuming?
Yeah, that's an extraction technique.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay. Derek, I saw your hands up. Go ahead.
Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, you're good.
Oh, great. Thanks for having me here and inviting me on, and I really appreciate what everybody's doing here in the industry. Want to say thank you to a couple of the Canadians that are on here, Robert, and I think Bruce is with us as well. So I'm partnered and have been for about 6 years with Canadian Hemp Sense up in Canada, and I just want to make some corrections. We've gone on over 5,000 plus acres in Canada. We are a 30,000 square foot manufacturing facility that does both hurd and fiber. And we make these great products. And through our experiences, knowledge, and leadership, we intend to carry on here in the United States. So the past year, we've been working on getting these products here into the market. So I guess my question is, it's not so much a question, but I want to urge everybody, and I think Gregg's bringing up some great points. It's not easy. Hemp is not easy. You really have to know what you're doing in the fields. And with the CBD rush and what we've seen in and out, everybody's running to the fiber market. And now everybody has a plan to be the next best fiber producers and seed producers. I want to urge everybody to look at the bigger, greater things that have to drive multiple millions of dollars of investment that are put into these projects. So what IND Hemp is doing, Gregg and the Elliott family, they're doing tremendous work. So kudos. Keep up the great work. You know, what I'm getting at is I've been inspiring this crop for over 14 years here in the United States. I'm so thankful for Ryan Laughlin for putting the seed in the soil, and we all should be. But we have to learn, and we don't force things. Let it grow. You can look at, if we build it, they will come model, but that's not always the case in the competitive fiber markets and industries that are out there. So I urge everybody to take a look, do your research. Gregg's bringing up some great information here. And I agree with him 100% on what's going on. I just want to add what we've done successfully and what our intentions and goals are here over the course of the next few years. We have a 30,000 square foot plus facility, and we have 5 patents on pelletizing, crumbleizing, shredding, and powderizing of all hemp stock that are North American and Canadian patents. So we take what we put in the bag very, very serious. And we are into Walmart, Canada, and a couple other stores up there. And it's not an easy journey. So if you do not have markets to go to, be careful. That's my word of advice.
I actually just did a great interview with Robert Hoban, and we were speaking about this specifically and making sure as you get into this, having space on the shelf, realizing that the markets that win or companies that win are the companies that have shelf space and how to get shelf space.
Exactly. And so we have 12 products. You can go to our website, hempsensusa.com. You can see all of our products, all the things that we've done, R&D. We've done development on our crumble, our hurd, and our fibers. So I just wanted to put that out there to everybody, not to impose on what Gregg's doing. I just want to know that, or let everybody know that what Gregg and IND Hemp are doing are amazing. I just spoke to Ken and Morgan last week. They're great people. So keep up the good work, everybody, but grow slow. That's my urgency of caution to everybody here.
Thank you for that. Good to meet you. I've followed you for a while and do have a lot of respect for what you guys have done and bringing it into the market. And I hope that I didn't lead to any offense in my free-flowing talk. I'm not obviously.
No, you're doing great. This is your platform. I just wanted to add value where I could.
Well, no, I appreciate that. And I will say, I mean, we are involved in a big project, and I'm fortunate that I get to play in the big sandbox with the family. And I get to share about it with everybody else because they're so busy building.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, Ken Elliott will be the first one. Ken Elliott's the president and founder of IND Hemp. He and the family and extended family are very, very, very deep into this world of industrial hemp and, creating opportunities for farmers. And Ken will be the first one that'll tell you when he speaks, like, don't do what we did and think smaller. And, there's
That's right.
another pathway, and there's, other equipment coming that is more modular and can be more regional. Yeah, there.
Always know your why, and you're hitting it right on the head. There's 50,000 uses. So as producers, as you are and as we are, come to us and work with us and expand your mind. We don't need 100 people or 100 companies selling hemp herd across the country for barn betting and competing against each other. Be creative, and think outside the box. I mean, we got Bruce on here is doing fantastic work at making car stuff out of hemp. Don't just stay in the same old wheelhouse. Think outside the box.
I'll let you guys have a little secret. And first of all, I'll give a little self promo. We are just launching a YouTube channel at IND Hemp, and we're on YouTube so we can have a little lower production value and be a little raw and quick. But our big plan is really just to turn the lens on what's happening and show people what it looks like building and talk about the realities. So check that out. I'm actually going to drop the first episode as soon as I get off of this because it wasn't done rendering before this meeting. But in a little bit, one of the shows we're going to do, and I actually went down to Montana Tech University and did one of the first interviews, and I actually happen to have a show and tell right here. So that right there, this is a piece of, basically it's a concrete that they use to seal oil wells. And I don't know if people are aware of the problem with all the oil wells that are opened in the country. Honestly, until 3 weeks ago, I had no idea it was a problem. You see documentaries talk about, belching cows and methane. There's over, 1 million oil wells that literally are 8-inch pipes out of the ground that are abandoned, and methane is just leaking out all day long. And there's a foundation in northern Montana called the Well Done Foundation that now that there's more incentive in the marketplace, they've been working for a bit, but now that the new administration has more incentive in capturing carbon and other things, they're basically trying to convert the sealing of these wells to a measurable amount of carbon that isn't going into the atmosphere in order to sell those credits on to other industries. And so we're going to put it together in a show in a little bit, but, we talk about hempcrete, and hempcrete is a lime hemp water. It's not really a concrete at all. And I will say I was under the impression, I think most of us, that you can't put hemp into concrete because it's not structural. Well, when you're capping a well, you don't need structure. It's actually, you can see this is actually broken. I took it out of the lab because they actually do compression strength. But I learned a lot about concrete recently. I'm not an expert, so I'm just repeating what I've learned recently. But concrete and steel are the two most carbon and energy intensive building materials that we have, and we make the most of them. So much so that if you're a builder and you're using concrete now, you actually have to pay carbon offsets against it.
Amen, brother.
Yeah, you gotta pay carbon offsets against the concrete that you're using. And so right now, we don't, I'll be honest, we don't have a true performance benefit. Although the research is going on, they believe if they can get more herd into the concrete and the compression helps, that it'll actually be more technically efficient for that first plug in the bottom of the well. But right now, just putting hemp herd into this concrete offsets the amount of concrete they're buying by whatever percentage. So even I think this is up to like 10 or 12% maybe. But that's a significant amount of concrete when you realize we have millions of wells that we need to seal. So think outside the box. I had no idea even, and I'm part of the company in the show. I had no idea till 2 weeks ago that these guys even had any hemp heard from us, and that it even worked. And I got to see, unfortunately, it was 27 degrees and snowing in northern Montana on Earth Day, but they actually had a Earth Day gathering and poured hemp into the bottom of the well, and we'll know very shortly if it's working like the concrete without the hemp in it. So, yeah, I think we're all excited to find that the big industries that have a potential for these materials, we're not even thinking about yet. It's not even on the table yet. And we need to get things built, get the right growers, get back to the seed and genetics talk. That's the biggest problem of everything. I mean, I think everybody here, if you know anything about fiber, we're not going to get to a big infrastructure of fiber in America above $2 a pound for seed. And to grow the tens of thousands of acres we want to grow, that's millions of pounds of seed. And so, we're thinking years ahead, who's replicating that seed, what varieties. So it's exciting times. And I'll just say, I know we're wrapping up here soon. Indie Hemp is extremely collaborative. The family's made a decision to build a legacy around supporting farmers in Montana and across the country by building an infrastructure that can, help the farmers that are there and help their kids stay on the farm and have another crop in their rotation. And we're extremely collaborative, and we're a pretty open book. You'll see if you check out our YouTube channel and our Instagram, I actually get the role of just showing what we're doing. And, good or bad, we're going to show you what it's like and bring you along. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Bruce, I'd love to hear from you. I know you mentioned all your favorite topics.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you very much. Mandy and I have been talking a little bit over the last few weeks about starting another one of these things, specifically about carbon. So, wow, this is blowing my mind, Greg, what you're talking about, because it's right along the same sort of thing. We are, myself and anybody else that would like to join in. Tracy Fielding is already in here. She's part of this as well. We're pursuing the X Prize for Elon Musk with something called Drawdown Hemp. If any of you have ever had a chance to pick up the book Drawdown by Paul Hawkins, it was a bestseller a couple of years ago, talking about the top 70 ways to reduce CO2 in the atmosphere. And Paul Hawkins went out and he tried to herd cats, and he was very successful. I like that term, herding cats, but he got 70 different teams to propose ways to reduce CO2. And one of the chapters was on hemp. It was the shortest chapter, and it says, "This is 2018, hemp is illegal, but we think hemp has a lot of potential." So, everybody out there in the hemp world, we have an opportunity to do something called Drawdown Hemp. And each one of the disciplines we're talking about, from fiber to herd to seed, Greg, what you just said about how it's being used in the oil wells to cap them off, and I hadn't thought about that. That's beautiful. But here's my question, and one of the things I wanted to get across about today with regards to grain. Just doing some very cursory research, I think there's a huge opportunity for grain to potentially substitute beef. And I'm going to talk about just some high-level numbers here. They aren't necessarily realistic. But don't think I'm saying we have to cut out all cheeseburgers, because I would hate to see that myself. But according to what I'm reading, for every ton of beef that's produced, 22 tons of greenhouse gases is produced. Not only the methane, but also all the nitrogen that's put on the fields in order to grow 70% of all crops that livestock consumes instead of just humans. But I don't know that number is exactly right. We have to look into that before again. So that actually, if you extend that number, it comes out to 1.5 gigatons per year. There are 900 different entities out there that are currently applying to win $50 million from Elon Musk's X Prize. And I don't think 890 of them are going to come up with 1.5 gigatons. So just in that measure alone, just from grain alone, potential there, it's huge. And then the second question about grain. How much palm oil can we replace with hemp? I know you can't cook with it like you can with palm oil. I know you can't put it in a lot of things. But how much? The question is there. How much diesel can be replaced by oil? There's going to be a discipline in following this, and it's going to be what we're going to be looking for. Again, herding cats is each team to make a proposal following a scientific standard of principles to quantify the CO2 that's either avoided or sequestered. And as a team, I see us all proposing this to Elon Musk. And I think we can win $50 million and divvy that up. I think we could all use a little change in our R&D departments. So just an open invitation if anybody wants to reach out to me on bruce.com or Tracy, you can also send you as well. We're looking to build a team here.
Thank you, Bruce. So we did set up a group. Bruce, I have it tentatively set for the first Tuesday of every month. So I'll send that out. I wanted to check with you first, but since you let the cat out of the bag, but I would definitely like to. I will continue to drive conversation if we want to. Bruce and I can sit down, or we can all get together if we want to do something, but really pick topics that we want to address specifically. But Bruce, I'll send info. So, and that will be all announced for sure. It'll be in the newsletter as well. That goes out. For those of you and Tracy, I saw added your email, Bruce. Thank you, Tracy, for doing that. I appreciate it. But for those of you that have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. My contact information is in the chat. Again, I will send out a follow-up email after this. I would love to connect with you. We are a membership-based group. We're $750 a year. You get access to all of our meetings, content, or $75 a month. I hate giving that plug, but I have to because that's why we're doing this, or that's what we're doing. But Gregg, I want to give you a huge shout out and say thank you very much for everything that you've shared. How do people get in touch with you if they want to connect or, yeah.
Well, the easiest way is to show up at the field when we're there because they will give you full attention. I put my email in there. It's Gregg with 2 G's at indhemp.com. I'll give you my phone number, but I probably wouldn't answer it if you called. I've been ignoring it. I've had 50 calls while we were on this. I don't know it, but yeah, I mean, as you see, I really enjoy talking about hemp. I really enjoy the role I get to play in helping to build infrastructure and trying to bring opportunities to the growers that we have in Montana and Washington and Idaho, and not Idaho, we're not yet, Oregon. We've actually got some organic acres in Oregon this year. We've expanded the acres in Washington, and so that's something I'm proud that I was able to bring with the relationship to IND Hemp is that we were able to expand our footprint and support the Northwest growers. And one thing, in this as well, and I think it plays a little bit, not perfectly into some of what Derek was saying, is that, you need to grow slow, but at the same time, nobody can do it on their own. Even if you have millions of dollars, you can't do it on your own. And we're all fortunate, and I would say extremely fortunate at this unique moment in time where this is happening in our lifetimes. Some of us have, been waiting for this for 30 plus years. And, there's an ability, it's rare that we have something that's so old, but yet there's a gap of what we know about it and the whole industry is new. And we're all just trying to figure it out. And, the more we can work together, at the end of the day, we're not an industry unless it works for everybody in the supply chain. And, right now we're all trying to develop the front side of the industry and develop products and processing and where it goes. But at the end, it's really about the growers and having the growers. I will say, as we expand fiber production, finding enough growers close enough to the facility that are willing to bet on it and go for it, that's going to be a challenge, and we do have the benefit that, in the short term, we can kind of get them there with some training wheels in our production and that we're, paying for the grain and they know they can be profitable on the grain while we figure out how to get them profitable on the fiber. But I'm going to, don't want to stay too long, but I'm going to revert to the problem that most people don't know we need to work on is genetics and replication of fiber varieties across multiple latitudes because, it's going to take a lot of seed to get there. And, the Chinese seed is good. We grew Jinma in Montana last year. This is where I was going. I'm going to take another little moment here. Sorry. For those who are interested, not drop off, and thanks for joining us. But one of the benefits we have in Montana as well is they understand that, a fiber crop is a flower crop. And for those that may or may not know, that some of the Chinese varieties, specifically the Jinma, there was some that came out of Sunstrand when it went down. So people all over the country grew it last year, and it went hot in Montana, and it got hotter the farther south you went. But one thing that we brought up with the Montana Department of Agriculture is multiple pathways of, negotiating a future that works. The first thing I'll say is that none of us were at the table 4 years ago when the time was to be at the table making a big point about, hey, fiber crops could go hot. We need something happening there. It was all about CBD and THC and those levels in terms of flower crops. But, we missed the opportunity to have a wide voice at the table that said, hey, some of the best fiber crops in China go 2-3% THC. You're never harvesting the flower on those crops. You're harvesting the fiber on those crops. And so we were able to get Montana to look at it in multiple ways. One, a pathway that decortication should be seen as destruction, right? So if you're converting a plant into something else, that's a pathway, right? And that's something that everybody should work on in every state. The other is, what's the definition of harvest? I don't know if a lot of you know about fiber, but, we do field retting in fiber production. So picture this, you've got a 10-foot high stand of Chinese jinma blowing in the wind in Montana. And in the middle of August, that might be, 0.8%, something. I don't think we got over 1% in Montana, but it did as it went further south. Well, when you harvest that crop, when is harvest? Is it when you cut it down, or is it when you bale it and take it off the field? Because if you're going to ret it, some of these crops we ret over the wintertime. They're just baling them now a couple weeks ago before they put spring wheat or something else in behind it. So, and Montana looks at it favorably like that, which is that, your harvest process is really that baling process when you turn the material into something that's coming off the field. When we swath it and lay it down in the field, that's not really a harvest. And if you look at it like that, for all of you that know, if you leave a cannabis plant out in the field all winter, the flower part that's got the little bit of THC in it, that's not going to be there in any measurable form when you actually bale the crop. So I do see one question, Ryan. Ryan, I don't see you there anywhere, but good to see you. We are growing some X59 trials to try different production methods for fiber, some early planting, some under pivot, but primarily the X59 is a dual purpose.
Rachel, I saw you have a question as well. Oh, you're on mute.
So, Greg, you keep coming back to genetics and just the importance of that price point. And I'm just curious how many varieties you are growing this next season.
Want to say it's 6 to 8 in the fiber variety that we're trying. We're trying a bunch of different. There's Ryan. Doing a bunch of different grain varieties as well. Our primary contract variety is the X59 because that's a seed that we work with. So pretty much most of our production acres are that X59. We do have, I don't even know the number. This is an agronomist question. I would be lying if I made something up.
It's okay.
A number of fiber-specific acres of the Jinma under contract. So we grew it last year in Montana. We know it'll grow in our area. We know Department of Ag will let us actually keep it once it's grown. And then we've got a number of other varieties we're testing. Roman's Ukrainian varieties, Halisa, and I can never say him. But he's been out. If you don't know Roman yet, look him up. He'll call you all the time.
I do. I believe we did get you some Viola Bresky, right?
Yes. Yeah. So you're with,
okay.
Yeah. So we have,
correct.
I know. And I think maybe even, I don't know if it's production, but I know it's not like small trial. I know there's a bit of it wherever he's got it.
Okay.
And we did see a little bit of Hinola, but wasn't super successful just in the timing last year.
Okay. Do you have Hinola for this upcoming season in the ground, or?
I don't know. I would think we would be doing it, but again, one of the things I will say about joining a great team in a building company is, I don't come from a farming background. I learned everything I know about farming by jumping into the hemp industry and trying to get farmers interested in it. And then we started working with an agronomist that, has a master's in agronomy and knows what he's doing. And now we get to that point of the conversation where I say, call Ben. He knows all of that. And he deals with all of our contracts and trials and university trials. And I would say we've got our fingers and feet in a lot of projects in a lot of places trying to help us both learn and try to help others in the industry learn. Especially coming back to talking fiber and the genetics is what works where. We get asked a lot of questions get a lot of things. And hey, will this work in Kansas? Will this work in Iowa? It's like, I don't know. We're not.
Yep.
So the more we can all share the success, and really at the end of the day, in anything farming, and this is basic farming, the success of the farmer comes down to a balance of input cost, purchase price of their crop, and the yield they get. And the way that you make it successful for the farmer is lower input cost and higher yield at a better price, right? And that's the variable work. And I will say, and no offense, Rachel, because we've never met, but you guys are way too expensive. You guys
I know. Well, we're bringing it domestically, so it's going to change.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, that's the thing is that the economics for a farmer, and I'll say even, Senator John Tester actually grows his own crop still. He's the last senator that farms in the country. He came out to our place and we were talking to him through, and first question the farmer asks is, what's my input cost? And they're just like, a bushel?
Yeah.
Like, and it's like, for even though all of us in the industry recognize that, hey, we're all working as hard as we can and make it as affordable as we can. And I know, importing seeds and raising certified genetics, we all have these challenges, but we need to think in the terms of the people whose livelihoods are based on growing it. And there's still a sticker shock there, and we haven't proven ourselves as an industry.
Yep.
You have 10 years of success where a farmer says, hey, my neighbor's been making money on hemp for 5 years. I'm ready to get into it. It's still a risk, and not to open another can of worms, there's still an insurance problem. So a lot of these farms, they're operating on lean commodities margins, and they're operating loan to operating loan. And so they run into issues where they can't sit on the grain, or they can't get financed for their other crops because they're growing hemp. Or, there's just so many different pathways. But at the end of the day, we all get to talk in these circles about moving the industry forward. But when you're boots on the ground in the field with a farmer and you're all excited and they have no idea how hard you worked for 3 years to get them a seed cost that is the best it could be, and they still just look at you like you're trying to, steal out of their kid's piggy bank. So that's a perception that we need to get over, and it's both on working to get, all three sides of that, right? We try to work on getting the input costs lower. We try to do the science so we can say this is the right thing to grow here, so your yield's going to be better. And we try to drive the market so that it can buy that crop at a profit for the farmer. But I will tell you, and we work with a lot of different growers, and a lot of them have great hearts and have been big supporters of hemp. Some of them didn't grow again this year. We have others that did. They're still figuring out, at the end of the day, and to get out of Montana, you look at the whole corn belt, you look at the Midwest and the upper Midwest, corn and soy are on runaway prices right now. And so producers out in those areas, you're competing for corn and soy acres where all of a sudden I can make money growing soybeans. I don't even have to deal with getting a license. I don't have to deal with testing. I just buy this Monsanto GMO shit, spray this stuff on it, and I get paid. And the reality is that's how a farmer looks at it out there. Corn, same thing. Corn's on good margins right now. If you can make money growing corn, why the hell would you deal with all the bullshit of growing hemp? Because as fun as it is for all of us, it's a lot of work and a lot of risk for a new grower.
You bring up a great point, Greg.
You guys, you're in the Midwest, Derek, yeah? You guys are probably seeing that.
Oh, well, you hit the nail right on the head right there. And, that's why I urge everybody just to grow slow, get it figured out. It's not a race. It really isn't. Just make sure you have the best plan. And ours took over 5 years to develop and where we're at. So it takes time, and, we get the same calls all the time, Greg. How's that? We have our own proprietary seed up in Canada that does extremely well for us. But my point is how's it going to do here? Our calls all across the country like yours. Hey, what's your seed going to do here? I don't know, because the one thing is the rules here in the United States. There's one other point I want to bring, Greg, that in the market space, in any farmer, any business owner here, the European market for the longest time was subsidized. Canada's had a lot of help from the government. There's no help here in the United States. Some grants, some things are developing, right?
Fees and bullshit.
Right. So there's been a lot of help from the other countries. So hats off to Canada and Europe and the leaders in the space. And like I mentioned earlier, There's guys still trying to get it figured out, and it's going to take a while. So you're hitting it all right on the head, and I'm in total agreement with you, sir.
Oh, thanks. Well, I look forward to meeting someday and talking shop.
Dave, I saw you.
Oh, Bruce. Yeah. Bruce, here. Little look there. See? That's all you get.
What's that, Derek?
You know what that is, Bruce. I'll tell you later.
Yeah. I didn't see it. I'm sorry.
I think we're wrapping soon. I actually got to do a little bit of work today.
A quick question for you, Greg. Yeah. How far away from production do you see hemp being grown to be viable? And in that frame of thought, how many plants do you see ultimately across the country realistically?
I don't have that crystal ball, and I don't feel that I'd be doing any justice to try to guess. I think regionally, and I mean, the thing that we're learning with hemp is, most of what people see in the marketplace now are herd-based products. You see animal bedding, you see hempcrete. That's just the tip of the iceberg of what we can do. Derek already mentioned, micronized stuff. There's a lot that herd can do and a lot that this plant can do. And as it grows in these markets, we're still at the point of we're figuring out how to get it in the field, get it out of the field, and do something with it. Right? We're at the point of approaching other industries, and there's non-woven industries, there's wipes industries, there's the auto industries, all these other guys. We don't even know enough about our own product yet to even speak the language of how they might start using it. And so there's going to be a learning phase of the converters and the downstream manufacturers and the 3Ms of the world to figure out, does this make sense for us commercially? And if it does, what does it look like? And one thing I will say is that when you do that and you get to that scale, we're going to need a lot of material. We're at this if we built 50 plants right now, we'd probably have too much animal bedding, right? But if we crack the door on some of these bigger industries that we're not even a foot in the door yet, the initial demand might be huge. The other thing that I'll say that we all should be very aware of is, and even more so coming out of this year in COVID, is no industry at scale is going to pigeonhole a supply chain. And so some of these bigger players, let's look at auto industry, right? We all know that in most of the world, BMW, Toyota, others use hemp fibers in their products. In fact, I think it's BMW only. The U.S. made cars don't use natural fibers because we don't have a supply chain. But if they're going to get into that, they're not going to bet the farm on us doing it. What if we get a plague of grasshoppers this year like we did last year and we don't hit the amount that we can? So even though, these companies that are popping up like IND Hemp and, there's people in Texas and there's people, a number of plants around the Midwest that are coming into fiber, the reality from the fiber side is if any of us are going to have a chance at the bigger industries that come, we're all going to need to be able to meet that quality, and they're never going to buy all of it from any of us because they want a diversified supply chain and a regional supply chain with the logistics. We look at even just in the past week, fuel goes up. Well, fuel goes up 10%. The distance that you're willing to drive a bale of straw to a processing plant decreases, and it's all relative, And so I would say that in the long run, I think we're going to need hyper-regional plants all over and probably smaller scale to support the growers. But before we can even get there, we need to figure out what grows where. And that's back to the right seed in the right area. If we can't show, especially on fiber, it's probably the easiest of the hemp options to plant and watch grow. You drill it in, you watch it go, you swap it, right? You don't have to worry about food safety. You don't have to worry about cannabinoids or getting hot or all these other things that we do. But you can't travel with it very far. It's not as good as it is in a bale. And if you come up, if we say you're going to get 8,000 pounds of biomass per acre and you get 3, well, all of a sudden, none of the math works anymore. And you hate us, you hate hemp, and you want to go burn the stuff in the field. So it doesn't make sense to buy the diesel even to truck it to where you can get paid on it. And these are all the things that we all collectively need to figure out before we run off and start contracting acres.
And Greg, turn your seed into oil that can be refined into diesel fuel so the farmer can use hemp seed oil in his tractor, in the field, and in his truck, driving it right to your plant.
But I love the thought, but at, retail $90 a gallon, in the...
No, I know, but we're just
the unfortunate reality is still
right.
cheaper. I think, not to go down a tangent, but I think we'll get to a hemp-based ethanol and other types of fuels from the biomass before who else. It does. I mean, I've heard it. I've done stuff with it, but if you're, especially in Montana, we're maybe 500, 600, 800 pounds an acre. So let's just say for easy math, we're 800 pounds an acre, and let's say we're easy math 40 pounds of grain to a gallon of oil. You're 100 gallons of oil an acre. I don't even know. I've lost my own math. Bottom line is, it doesn't pay to burn it. It pays to feed.
That's right. It's got some hemp frisbees in. Oh, it's happening.
Hey,
Greg.
One more shameless. No, go ahead, Drew.
Sorry, yeah, real quick with the X59, and we talked about genetics. I had to jump for a minute, so I might have missed it. But we know that hemp, so I've been on the cannabinoid seed side and doing some HGI genetics, and then we're looking at some MS77, which is an Australian varietal, to see how it does, because a lot of the northern, even into Europe, Ukrainian varietals, hemp really loves being at that 45th parallel. So you're lucky where you are because you're farther north. But as we move those genetics south, they start flowering when they're 6 inches tall. So, you already alluded to that. Like Texas is not going to see the same performance from your genetics, or is it? I mean, have you seen any genetics that are performing well in the southern states? I'm in North Carolina, and we haven't had much success with some of those northern type varietals that are successful. So today I just saw an email from New Frontier Data, and they're saying the big issue is genetics, is finding, seeds that are going to perform well around the country. And right now, that hasn't really been the case. Is there something that I'm missing?
No, I think it's because where did hemp stay when it was prohibited, right? It stayed in China, it stayed in Northern Europe, and that's where development happened. And so when North America came online, when the Canadians came online, they had access to European stuff, and it kind of stayed at that latitude. I think we all know that this plant can do amazing things, and we're just barely at the front edge of breeding it and figuring out what we can do. So right now, do I know of anything that works in Texas? I personally don't. I know that the stuff that works up north gets hot as shit in Texas. I heard like 1.5, some things pushing 2.0, and they don't like that in Texas, even if it's 10-foot fiber. And we've had the same issue, X59 even, the origins of X59 are northern Russian varieties before it was, brought into Canada, and then Terramax kind of taking care of it in Canada. So even in our northern states, we're at the southern end of where it goes, and, we get the same thing. People try to grow it in other places, and it starts flowering. One thing I will say, and I saw a picture just recently, I can't remember who it was on the phone, somebody was all worried, especially with X59 and some of the other varieties as well. You'll see the male flower develop real early. Almost looks like a pine cone up top, kind of dark. But like with an X59 plant, sometimes even in the first, month or so, you'll see that develop and you'll be like, oh my God, everything's flowering. Well, the females aren't flowering yet. And then what you'll see as it grows is it starts stretching up, this is obviously a female seed head, but picture that little cone of male flower starts in the bottom, and then it just moves up and stretches the stalk out the whole time, and the top just keeps moving up. So it's obviously visible a male. And I will say, I live Oregon, Washington, and we've had, legal, medical, and recreational cannabis for many years, almost 10 years out here. And a lot of people have pollen concerns, including Oregon State University, who first year they did grain trials. As soon as they saw male plants, the legal department made them pull them all because of the amount of lawsuits and pollination and contamination in Oregon. And yet those plants could have gone to a longer maturity. We lost the ability to learn watching them grow because we didn't know that, like, just because you see that flower doesn't mean there's any pollen in it, and doesn't mean it's going to do anything until it grows up and opens up. So, yeah, that's an observation and not answering your question, but I'll say we don't know. And one thing that Derek pointed out, and I think it's good for us all to talk about more often, is the regulations make the slow learning curve difficult. In that, Montana this year with the new state plan, it's like $1,600 to get a license to grow hemp. Okay, if you got to pay the state $1,600 for the right to grow this crop, you're not going to grow it unless you can pencil out enough acres in a plan that even looks like it's going to be profitable. Meaning, people aren't spending the money to pay the state for the right to grow a small trial plot of 5 varieties to learn what's going to grow there. And so the regulation kind of hinders the slow learn that we could have. I mean, the answer to that Texas question, and everybody I talk to in Texas, Oklahoma, any of those southern states, I say, call this guy, get the seeds that we all know about. Call Rachel and get the B Lab and get the varieties they've got, get the other varieties that other people are growing, put it in the ground and let's see, try to have a plan that you don't need to pay your mortgage with it, because you won't, but we're never going to learn unless people put seeds in the ground. And unfortunately, our regulations nationwide are prohibitive for that slow learn. Yeah, Derek.
Yeah, Greg, just to go off of what you're saying, exactly what he's saying. Go ahead, get your trial plots going. But I know there's facilities starting here and starting there. So only start putting the seed in the ground. Just do your trials. Don't put any more investment that you think you're going to acquire 1,000 acres of hemp, because there's no processing. So like Greg said, there's bales of rotten hemp in Montana because everybody's cart was way before the horse. Okay. So that's why IND hemp, that's why Hemp Sense, we're doing these things in moderation and growing to that capacity. Don't put 1,000 acres in because you may lose it. Don't go out there without a plan and be prepared to fail. That's all.
Well, I think that kind of speaks to this chicken and egg that we keep running into, right? It's this egg for a chicken, chicken for the egg. We really need our farmers to grow. Real quick, before we sign off, last question. What type of talk or what is Montana doing about regulations for zoning to prevent the pollination? Or is it something that they're really even addressing?
From what I know, and fortunately, we don't have to worry about it too much because it's
right
on the marijuana side, fighting in the legislature. One benefit that Montana has, and not to take away from anybody that wants to grow medical cannabis or recreational cannabis in Montana, because I support all forms of the plant in all areas. But one of the things that we learned in Oregon, Washington, being in an area that, Oregon, every backyard that has a fence around it could potentially be a grow because you've got personal grows, right? So literally every address possible is a potential, conflict. And there's certain valleys, the Willamette Valley from Portland all the way down into Northern California. That is where all the beautiful flowers are grown. That's where all the specialty crops are grown. That's where all the craft cannabis is grown. It would never make sense or be responsible for us, and the climate isn't right, for us to try to go grow grain over there.
Right.
Meanwhile, in the middle of Montana and even eastern Oregon and Washington, where we have the Palouse Hills, that's where a lot of wheat production is. You look at where other crops are, and where we're growing grain, we're surrounded by thousands, tens of thousands of acres of grain, wheat and barley production. And it wouldn't ever make sense for anybody to go run drip irrigation in there. There's no irrigation. And so one of the things that I adapted a couple of years ago, and I share with everybody when I speak all over, is find where it fits. And one of the problems that we had coming into this industry, and I was guilty of it, we tried things all over Oregon, Washington, is to learn that, a crop is going to fit where the crop fits. If we're talking a grain crop, I get calls all day long. I got a guy in Oregon who's been blowing my phone up all day. He wants me to call. First question is, what drill do you have? What combine do you have? And what does your bin storage look like? And if they stumble on any one of those questions, they're not the right guy to grow hemp grain, because this isn't a crop where you're going to go buy a $500,000 combine and, a big air drill just to plant a hemp crop. So either you're a grain farmer and in your barn you have these implements, or you're not. And that's kind of the first question of, does it make sense for you to even look at this crop? I think it's wider with fiber because people that grow grain can grow some fiber, but even growing fiber, the first thing you ask is, where are they growing hay? Where are they growing alfalfa? Who has the swathers and the balers, and where is that equipment physically in somebody's barn that you could go hook up to it and bring it to a field? Because even if you can grow a great field of fiber and you think that you can get enough biomass that is going to pay based on what you think it's worth in the market, based on what you think you penciled out diesel would be, based on your 85 miles to that plant, at the end of the day, if you got to go rent a piece of equipment from halfway across Montana, you just lost everything you thought you were going to make to begin with. So I would say, it's one of the things I say over and over again is find where it fits. And that means, where does cannabinoid production fit relative to grain production, relative to fiber production? And it speaks for seed as well. Where does the right seed work? Out here in eastern Washington, on the Palouse Hills, we've got, if anybody familiar, Google Palouse Hills. It's a beautiful rolling hills area. and you get shaded on the north side of a hill relative to the south side of the hill. And, the season temperatures come on earlier or later depending on the year. There's over 200 wheat varieties that they grow just in that small area of eastern Washington. And we're here talking nationwide about maybe a dozen common varieties that we all have access to right now in every state in the whole country. We're talking, wheat is so developed that, some guys, if he plants 2 weeks later on the field next to this one, he's going to grow a different variety because of how it works and how it times with his harvest season. So again, coming back to learning, the genetics in the plant, there's a lot that we have to learn to maximize how each of these varieties or their offspring get acclimated to a certain area. And you get the right seed in the right area, and all of a sudden your production is 20% more yield. Well, all of a sudden now you're making money, and at the end of the day, when it comes to building a supply chain of farmers that actually have the interest of still doing this after a couple of years, you got to put money in their pocket. And again, all the different variables we talked about, from fuel to input costs and everything, at the end of the day, if we can show them 10% better return, then they're happy. In Montana, our plan there is, let's get them into the game with grain, show them that they can make a little money with grain. But now let's see if we can not just incentivize them to bale the straw, but actually give them some money on it because we'll buy the straw and turn it into something. And
hey, Greg, I got a question. One of the questions that I've been asked is on cattle, is because there's some people that want to use it for cattle feed. When can you run cattle on it?
Well, easier to say when you can, because really the regulation is anything that goes into a USDA certified food supply. So if you're a rancher, in Montana, everything's processed through a couple large meat producers. So if you're growing a cow in Montana and it's going to the food supply, right now you can't feed it a hemp product because of the AFCO regulations and all the work that we need to do. Again, I started this talk with it. For those that are first on, if you're not a member of the Hemp Feed Coalition, please look at it and join us for $100. You're just part of the conversation in that collective voice. Essentially, we have to do full life cycle tests and university studies to validate essentially supposed to be validating safety and efficacy, but really all the FDA is worried about is cannabinoids. And all the work we just did in this chicken study was all about proving that if we harvest a compliant crop out of the field and it's less than 0.3% coming out of the field, and we know now multiple universities across the country have validated and give scientific work to back that up, that within the seed itself, within the germ of the seed itself, there are no cannabinoids. The only cannabinoids that you're going to have in a hemp seed is potential contamination of a resin dripping to the outside of that seed that came from the flower. But inside the seed, there are no cannabinoids. We know that now. Somebody did a lot of work and paid a lot of money to finally know that. We can say, hey, there's nothing in that. So really what the FDA is looking at, and AFCO through this process, is they're looking at, we need enough samples from all these varieties from all over the country and prove that we're not going to see a THC or CBD level compound in a grain variety over a certain amount. And then that's treated as a contaminant, just like anything else, a heavy metal contaminant. There can be a trace. There's a threshold of what's appropriate. So all of the work right now in animal feed is literally getting the FDA comfortable with the fact that we start with a compliant crop. We know there's nothing in the seed, and they're worried that by the time we get it down to this, a pellet out of a seed press, basically seed goes in, these two things come out. You get oil and you get seed meal, either in a pellet form or in a milled powder form. And that right there is incredibly nutritious, one of the most nutritious things on the planet. But they're worried that somehow in this, even though we had no THC in the plant, we had no THC in the grain, and we even have to test this, and we know there's no cannabinoids in this, that somehow if you feed a cow this for 6 months, they're going to end up with THC in the meat, and your kid's going to get high on a cheeseburger. That's the bullshit we're really still dealing with in animal feed. Meanwhile,
is that possible? Is that possible, Greg?
What's that?
I want one of them hamburgers.
Meanwhile, this same thing, you mill it into a protein powder, and you can go down the street to a grocery store in your town right now and buy it and feed it to your infant or your grandmother. So somehow, that's the bullshit that we're dealing with. So help get into the fight. I don't know if I got around your question, but yeah, it's a bunch of red tape. And the thing about cows is full life cycle study on a herd of cows is going to cost, a few $100,000 to support that through the life cycle. So right now, we started with chickens. There's things happening in equine and other areas. Basically, the easier the study is where we're starting from. There's a sheep study that IND Hemp supported at Colorado State that's feeding hemp seed meal to sheep. And sheep are a cheaper version of a rudiment to learn what's going to happen to a cow. So basically, it's more affordable to do sheep first, learn what you need to have a better feed cyst going into cows. But I will say in parallel, Oregon State University Global Hemp Innovation Center actually helped us all out huge in that they started feeding pelletized spent biomass to cows. Just recently, they did a sheep study as well. They kind of kept it under wraps because obviously we can't feed these things, but the problem that we have is that we have an unmeasurable amount of cannabinoids in this raw product. Therefore, we still have an unmeasurable amount of cannabinoids in the final meat. And therefore, there's a lot of worry and wonder about what could happen. The benefit of the Oregon State study is they said they know, I think it was between 12 or 15% CBD residual in the biomass that they fed. So now we've got a scientific study that says, hey, we know we gave them this much for this long. And now we've got tissue samples that show, and I don't know what the results of that are, but that's going to help the brain side of the hemp feed thing huge. If Oregon State can study, if they can publish that, hey, we fed 12% hemp biomass for 6 months, and then we weaned them off for a month, and we have no traceable level in the meat, all of a sudden it makes our argument of 0 plus 0 equals 0 much easier. Right now it's 0 plus 0, but somehow.
Heaven forbid they don't get any Roundup.
Or paraquat or select.
Down that rabbit hole.
Okay, guys. Well, we are well over. Greg, I know you had to get off or jump for work. Robert, I just saw you chime in. I don't know if you wanted to say anything really last minute, but I want to tell everybody thank you very much for joining. Thank you. I'll send this out next Thursday. We'll be back next week on Tuesday. We have a networking meeting. I just ordered a Frisbee, by the way, Dave. So I'm really excited. But yeah, next Thursday, we have another education series. It is on with ASTM. So Darwin and Dave from ASTM and the GMP Collective but speaking about all aspects of hemp and what they're up to. So thank you very much, you guys. We'll see you next week. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you, Mandy.
In the chat, I wasn't able to see. Is there a way to get access to that later, or does it go away when you click shut?
Nope, I'll give you a copy. I copy this. For those of you that are still on, you'll get a copy of the link and the transcribed notes as well as the chat. So Greg, you'll have it. And then I'll send over a copy of the questions that we received prior so that you can kind of address anybody specifically and have a way to reach out to those that were on today.
Nice. Well,
Thanks, man.
Anybody wants to see what it's like to plant a few hundred acres in a big air drill in Montana? That's our first episode for our YouTube channel this week. So ride along and get the real feel.
Cool. Send it over and I'll share it. I'll send it out in our newsletter for everybody.
Greg, I'd love to get on a call with you sometime.
Yeah, let's connect there. I look forward to speaking with you.
Sounds good.
Talk
soon. Thanks.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Mandy.